So how do you train up for that command role?
Yeah, I think a lot of it just boils down to experience. So you look at, I was a fresh graduate from the Naval Academy as an ensign. In my first division, I had 42 sailors working for me. And, I'd done a little bit of the peer leadership when I was at the Naval Academy as a company commander and stuff. But when you're actually in front of a division and you're learning that, and I made plenty of mistakes, so leadership mistakes throughout my time because I constantly always trying to perfect it. And I think anytime you try to perfect leadership, you're going to make mistakes because you figure like, ooh, that didn't really work so well.
But you have to try stuff, right?
But you try stuff, but you also learn. And then each major wicket, as you work through your seniority in the military, you go through additional training, you get additional experience, you get exposed to different environments. So that by the time, and there could be a natural proclivity too. The only people that make it to command are the people that want it. So it's not like everybody gets to just have command. In fact, that's considered really the ultimate position in the Navy is to have command at sea. That's the epitome. Is if you have command at sea, that's as good as it gets.
It's good to be the king.
And it truly is. It probably is the closest that the U.S. will ever come to having a monarchy is a captain of a ship at sea.
Yep.
But you just kind of get to it. So at the point where you're in command, you kind of already,
you figured it out by then. Yeah.
The things that used to stress you when you were 21 and 22 don't stress you anymore.
Right.
And I wish I'd kept a journal from when I was, 20. Everybody says you should always keep a journal and you go back, and I wish I had because, you think about the things you deal with now that you're just like, it's not a big deal. You just work through it. But as a 20-year-old, you might have been like, oh my gosh, this is the
it looks like either
Earth
a cliff or a
the
wall.
world is falling apart kind of thing. And so you grow up in that maturity with the experience that comes with it and just learning. And it's not, it's not like you just walk in there and like, I got this and everything's going. In fact, one of the best advice I got going into, and you've probably heard things similar, is like, is it better to be good or lucky? And it's like, well, it's better to be lucky. And I had the advice I got was like, you could be the best leader ever. You just take care of your people. You got their respect. You can also be the best ship driver either. You could drive a ship into port without ever using a tug or any hairy situation. But you could be all those things. But if you don't have a lucky bag, none of that matters, because if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, it doesn't matter how good you are. And it kind of goes to that phrase. And so I've always kind of kept in the back of my mind is like, I think I'm good. But man, I got to make sure
lucky as well.
If it all turns to poo.
And some of it comes out to that timing too. And then you can philosophically, you go to the point, well, what is luck? Just preparation plus opportunity.
Yeah.
So if you need a lucky bag, well, you prepare for it. And if the opportunity presents itself, you can take advantage of it. So I think if you stressed about everything that could go wrong, you could be held accountable for, because any given day they could have, and the Navy's quite public about their firings, but they're also very deceptive about why. They just say we had loss of confidence in their ability to command. That's as simple as they say. That's all they say. That's the press releases. I lost confidence in their ability to command, and they got relieved.
Yeah.
Good luck doing that in the commercial world.
Yeah. There is no fair work in
no, there's none of that.
No 3 warnings.
And I was thinking about, when I think about, I was an ensign, I showed up, I had my first division 42, and they said, hey, by the way, here's your collateral duties. You're now the command historian. You're now the public affairs officer. You're now this. And I was like, but I'm an engineer. I'm not a writer. And they're like, you got to do it. And and you need to do a weekly news submission every week for the captain to review. Yeah. And you didn't have to, well, that's not in my job description. No, I'm not going to do it. You're just like, aye, sir. And you learn to do it. And thankfully, because I had to do something I didn't want to do, I actually got to the point where I felt like I'm a fairly good writer these days. And, I've had a couple of articles published in newspapers and magazines and stuff like that. And it's all potentially because I was forced to do something I didn't want to do.
Well, that's part of the training, stretching you to do the things that you don't necessarily do.
It wasn't fun. There's times I was cursing and it's like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this anymore. I hate this job. But I stuck through it. And after 26 years, I look back, I'm like, wow. Yeah, it wasn't easy, but man, am I so happy that my life is in a good place because of the challenges, the resilience that I had to build along the way.
So that's really interesting. Then we get into somewhat of a philosophical thing. You brought up the topic of how do you train. How do you train to be a competent human being?
Oh, is that the secret of life or the
secret of life? 42. Yeah, you need those challenges. You need to build that resilience. You need to fail and learn from it. And this is what we're now facing, and it seems to be that we're facing with a couple of generations where they've never really been challenged and they haven't built up that resilience because we've had helicopter parents and what's the other phrase, bulldozer parents who clear the path in front of you. And, everyone gets a participation prize and all the rest of it. And it's like things go a little pear-shaped and it all gets too hard.
Struggle's a great teacher.
Yeah, you know, I'll share something that was kind of personal with me. Is that I was, I guess, a relatively senior lieutenant at the time, and I was doing my department head tour, so operations officer. And this is kind of the point where if you do well, there's a good chance you're going to screen for command. You don't do so well, you're never going to get command. So you basically your career ends at that point. And so there's a lot of pressure riding on your performance, and you start off and you're all gung ho and like, I'm going to do this stuff. And I ended up just getting into an environment where, you know, good people, but you know, it was challenging. It was stressful. Like I was incredibly stressed out because, you know, I was held to account for different things that were out of my control, but because I was, you know, that person, I was the operations officer, and they said, you know, you should have foreseen this happening and stuff. And I remember I also owned our IT system, and our IT system went down over the weekend. And they're like, you know, you're expected to be on the ship until that system gets up. I'm like, but I can't do anything. I'm just the officer. And they're like,
you just got to be there.
Expectation. So it got to the point, and it was just the stress of, and a lot of it, and I don't like to point fingers at anybody, and you know, because I definitely had my fair share of probably missteps and stuff like that. But it was just an environment where on Friday I was, Dale, you're doing an awesome job. You're great. And on Monday it's like, what the hell? Why were you not waiting for me on the quarterdeck when I arrived with this message and stuff like that? And you're just like, but you just said I was, you know, kind of thing. And so it was a lot of that. And I was really stressed. So I remember the phone, every time it would ring, like my heart would race, and the stress level, and I hated it. I really didn't like it. You know, if I look back on now, it's probably pretty close to like, that was probably the lowest point. Like it was just stress. I wanted to come home, and I was the first person on the ship. I was the last person on the ship, you know, kind of thing. I'd come home and I just want to sit in front of TV and just completely switch off. And my wife would be like, what are you doing? You have a toddler here. You got a 2-year-old girl that wants to see you. You need to snap out of it. I don't care. And then it made me really realize that I needed to focus on my family. Like that was my center of gravity. And so I did that. And I looked for it, and it probably took me about 2 years to really fully get over it. As I look back and reflected, like, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? And one of the things that struck me is I had not the first captain, but the second captain there goes, Dale, where you been? I'm like, sir, what are you talking about? Like, I'm the one keeping the ship afloat. And he's like, I haven't seen you in 3 days. And it didn't click at the time, but as I reflect on it, I was like, you know what? That's my fault. I wasn't keeping my boss informed of what I was doing. I was doing all this great stuff. And they were completely happy with it.
But he didn't know.
But because he didn't know about it, and I didn't give him a chance to say, you know what, I agree or disagree. I was just doing it. And that's the way I was brought up. Actions speak louder than words. And so I was doing it. And then I realized that, wait, that's what actually caused a lot of my problems. I wasn't a good communicator to my boss.
You got to manage up.
I got to manage up. Yeah. And so I went into my next tour after I learned that, and I said, you know what? It's unnatural for me just to come into a room and start rambling. I'm going to take my new boss, and I'm just going to go in there, and I'm just going to ramble like, hey, here's what I got going on today. Yeah, you know, I had a good breakfast, and then I'm going to go down here, and then I'm going to tour the plane. And crazy enough thing about it is I was incredibly successful. All of a sudden, I went from feeling like I was the scum of the earth and near a breaking point mentally to the fact that I had learned from that, and I became the best communicator. And then after my career just kind of took off, and I think, and I look back on it, it was probably the darkest point of my career as a person. And I think a lot of people would probably have just tapped out or go like, I need a mental health day or something like that. But because I was forced to fight through it, I learned who I was, and I learned what environment I can't succeed in. And so now when I see those paths starting to come, like I'm going down that path, like I know how to prevent it. And I think that really builds up the resilience. And I tell people that are like, oh, you've had such a successful career. And it's like, yeah, but I also got tested pretty hard. And I think the surviving of that test is what made me successful going
it's
forward.
not dissimilar in the corporate world.